Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So now I have the pleasure of introducing Steff McGonagle of Envisage Information Systems. Under Steff's responsibility, Envisage has gone from being a small startup to one of the largest retirement software companies in the world. It is focused on creating web and workflow solutions for those in the retirement industry, specifically in the financial sector. And Steff has been at this since 1995. So if you would welcome Steff.
Thank you, Sarah.
Absolutely. Now, Steff, I'd love to hear a little bit about what Startup Grind, those words mean to you, and you've been at this since 1995, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about that process.
Yeah, I get the Startup Grind, when I first heard it, kind of rang a bell with me. Mm-hmm. This is not an easy process, and so I can think of an awful lot of tough challenges we had, but I also can think of an awful lot of really high times where the team members came together or the clients came together and really made it special. So it is a grind, mm-hmm. but it's kind of like any athletic event. There's some tough stuff, but then there's always the wins that keep you going. So that's really what it is.
Can you give an example of one of those low times and one of those high times?
One of the low times, I would say, has to do with when we lost a bunch of our clients in a very short period of time. So we started the week, we were probably employing at that time about 25 people, started the week with everybody being overloaded, ended the week with basically everybody being unemployed. So that was one of those special times. So we had 4 different contracts canceled in 1 week.
Wow.
And you can't predict that stuff. It just happens.
So you had basically lost 90% of your business in 1 week.
Yeah,
and not
pretty
only
much.
managed to survive that, but come out ahead in the long run.
Yeah, and that's really goes to kind of the credibility we had in the marketplace at that point and the team members. Basically, we met with the team and said, look, we don't know that we can pay you. We don't know that we're going to keep the doors open. In fact, we're pretty sure we're not. But we'd like to give it a try. And if you guys all want to go do other work for a while and see if we can survive, I appreciate that. And basically all of the team said, well, a couple team members said, hey, I got work I need to do on my house I haven't done, so I'll just go do that without pay and see what work picks up. But the bulk of the team said, we don't have jobs if we don't do this, so we might as well just do this and see what happens. And so they stuck it out. They worked for free.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. And we called our clients at the same time and told them we'd be out of business by Friday. And because we just didn't know how we were going to make payroll a month from now. And to a T, all the clients basically said, look, we want you to stay alive. What do we got to do to help you? And so every one of our clients chipped in one fashion or another to make sure we survived. So that, you get your low point and your high point all happen within 1 week.
That's really incredible.
Yeah.
You must have created an incredible product and an incredible atmosphere in your office to have people.
The team did. It was really the team that comes together and says, we want to make this happen. Because it wasn't me that said, hey, I'll work for nothing and stay there. The team did. They looked at each other and said, let's all make this happen. And some of those team members are still with us, which is pretty amazing to me.
That is really incredible.
Yeah.
So what does innovation mean to you in Envisage Information Systems?
For Envisage, there's just a couple sides to it. One is innovation, as in what can we do to help people retire or live a second phase of their life with financial freedom. So for us, innovation there is what new tools, techniques, ways of communicating people can we come up with that we can then license back into the marketplace that will help people put themselves in a better position when it's time to retire. And then from the other side has to do with what can we do with the way the company runs to really set a different standard for what a work life should be. So innovation happens on both sides from my perspective.
So what is that like? Is that setting up a process or setting aside time to specifically
Which
focus
thing?
on it?
Which side of that?
Keeping innovation moving in the workforce, primarily in the workplace.
You have to make a conscious decision that you're going to pass on some short-term gains to bet on some long-term potential. Mm-hmm. So if you're optimizing right now for billings, like how much money can we generate right now, you don't have a lot of space in there for innovation because you're just paying the bills. Mm-hmm. If you say, well, I'm willing to forgo some of that money right now because I want to make a bet on the future, now you've opened up some space for innovation. And so it's a very conscious decision on how to write that balancing act. If you spend too much time on innovation, which I've done in the past, I've ruined a couple businesses doing this, that if you spend too much time on innovation and, hey, how are we going to do that, you'll basically run the business into the ground, at which point you have no money to innovate. So it's a balancing act.
Huh, it must take some talent to balance that. That's a tough choices to do.
You got to pay attention to it, but to me, it's common sense. You know, you balance your checkbook, right? I hope, right? So, so you balance your checkbook. You know, how much does that take, right? It takes the first time you cut it a little too close, you get a little nervous, and then you don't do it again. Well, this is the same thing. Like I say, it took me a couple tries to learn from other business people where that balancing line is, and also you got to learn what your weaknesses are. I learned after the third try that I need a partner who can really make this whole idea come together, because I'm not a detail person, I'm a concept person. So I got lucky, I found a partner, he and I got along really well, and he really helped drive us with the rigor that made us successful. I could be the front man and have the ideas, but without him driving what was going on behind the scenes, we never would have made it. So you really got to figure out how to play to people's strengths.
Is there a quote that you and your team live by or take?
Well, I would say the most common really is kind of the guidelines for making decisions around the company, and that is it right for the client, is it right for the team member, and is it right for the company? And so if nobody's around and something happens, you have to make a decision. All we ask is you look at those different pieces of the decision criteria, and if you can answer honestly and with the best of your intent, truthfully to those, and you think this is the right decision, then you should make it. And you should never be found wrong for making a decision based on that. So I would say that's a guiding principle at the company.
That's a really good guiding principle. I like that one.
Well, it's simple, I can remember it. So,
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on business plans?
I'm not real fond of them.
No?
I always have had a little bit of gripe with the idea that you sit, draw out this master plan and fill in all the spreadsheets and do all these predictions, and then you go out and execute and expect that to be reality. I think the idea of a business plan is forcing the rigor to think through what are some of the decisions you're going to make and what are some of the trade-offs is excellent. But as soon as you're done doing that, it's almost like you put it in the drawer and go live the real world. And so I think from a rigor of thought process, it's good. From an idea of, hey, this is our master plan and we're going to execute against it, I would love to meet somebody who can do that. Because, I mean, to me, you're just responding to the market. You have a picture of where you want to go, and after that, you've got to adapt to whatever the market tells you.
You must have seen quite a bit of adaptation over the last few years.
We have.
Yeah.
We have. We grew in the last 4 years from, I'd say, about 30 people to just under 300. So not only have we had to adopt and adapt to the changing environment of the marketplace and go through a couple recessions, but we also had to adapt with how do you have the kind of culture we want when you're not a small family of 50 people or 20 people. You're now close to 300. And one of the things that most amazed me in the growth of the company is when we went from about 50 people to 200 people and the culture didn't change. And when we were 20 people, if somebody had told me that you could do that, I would have said it would have been impossible. There's no way you can add that many people in 18 months, 2 years, and have the culture survive. And the team members had such a strong passion for what they want the culture to be, that even as we added all these other team members, the culture made it. And that, like I say, nobody could have ever told me that was possible.
Do you think that was primarily created through strategic hiring, or because as people were brought in, it was join this culture that we've created?
Well, if we weren't sitting here on TV, I'd say it's dumb luck. But it is very careful hiring in our case, because there's a lot of people who don't fit our culture. And so they would come there and they would never find happiness. We don't have what they are looking for to be successful. They may be very talented, but we're not the right place for them. So we do have to be very careful in the hiring. But also we got very lucky with the people who chose to work there who then helped the next people who came in adapt to the culture. But joining Envisage is a pretty rough ride because it's so non-traditional. We've got a number of Envisage team members here, and most of them who have worked in some other culture company will tell you that it's an 18-month slog to really get to the other side and really feel like you're at home. And you're happy and you really think it's a great place to work, but you can't figure out how to measure success. And eventually you realize you measure success yourself, not by some boss telling you you're successful. But we're so trained to look to our bosses to say, am I doing the right thing? What do I have to do to succeed? That if we put you in some spot where nobody's going to tell you that, you're lost. And that's what happens to a lot of people at Envisage when you first get there. But once you come out the other side, it's like, wow, I'd never work anyplace else. This is pretty cool, you know. And that's what happens. But it's not easy. And somebody has to say it's worth the price to put people through that. Otherwise, you're never going to get that culture.
Well, that's really definitely very profound. So I've heard that you say that success is 2 parts hard work, 1 part 2 parts hard work, 1 part preparedness, and a dash of luck.
A lot of luck. Yeah.
Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, it almost goes back to the business plan. There's any number of times if I look back on Envisage's career where we could have been a success or a failure. And something totally out of our control stepped in and changed the direction or affected our chance of success. One of our biggest wins that makes people look at us and say, wow, you guys are such a success, really hinged on 2 people who took a bet on us. The company had done a lot of work to build credibility and to build confidence, but we were working with a really big corporation, and somebody else in the corporation said, I don't want you doing business with those guys. So we basically were out of work. 2 people in that corporation said, that doesn't make sense to us because they're really good. And they fought the battle. And they basically were the turning point for when we could really grow like crazy. If those 2 people hadn't showed up in our lives, you wouldn't be talking to us. We'd just be another little computer company sitting out in the cornfields of Genoa. But for some reason, we look like a success now for whatever success means to people. But a lot of it hinged on the team basically grinding it out and saying, we can do this, and 2 people who we never met before stepping in and saying, no, you guys are really good technically, but you really are stupid at working with a big company. So we'll help you with the big company side. You guys do what you do best. It's like, okay. But if they hadn't shown up, you wouldn't be talking to me.
That is a good
So the preparation was that the team was ready to do it, and they were ready to tough it out. The luck was, where'd these 2 guys come from? And why did they stick their necks out for us? And they did. And we learned phenomenal things from them. And they're some of the best leaders I've met as far as separating out the intent of the people and their abilities. So I've learned a lot from them.
You touched on success. So what does success mean to you?
For me, we actually had a conversation on this just yesterday. Some people were talking to me about success. For me, success has to do with the people that I interact with, not the trappings of a business. So for me, success is people spending their time in an environment where they enjoy working and where they can solve problems for other people, so they're basically helping other people. So having an environment where people look back after spending 10 years, 20 years, 5 years there, where they say, wow, I really enjoyed my time there, and I really miss that group of people, and that was a really special time in my life. That's success. Building a world where that can happen, that's success. We got lucky that we were able to do some of that and get some financial independence at the same time, but ultimately that was success for me.
That's great. What advice would you give to a startup at this point in time that maybe is hitting a grind and having a tough time?
I think you really got to decide why you're doing it. Because there's any number of places to quit. And there's any number of times I would have quit if somebody would have just paid off my debt. So I mean, I can think of 3 or 4 years where I felt totally trapped. And if anybody had come through and said, I'll take this over and just retire your debt, I probably would have taken them up on it. Now, I might have regretted it, but the stress and the challenges and the cost to my family going through that stuff, you know, I would have been hard not to do it just for the sake of my family and what it was costing them to do some of this stuff. So for me, I had a goal when I started this business of what I wanted to do at the other end. And it really wasn't the business. It was something I wanted to do after the business. But the business was part of getting it there. And building in a culture where the people could enjoy what they're doing was part of getting there. So I would say for anybody who's in this, who decides they want to be an entrepreneur and go through this, you really got to pick why you're doing it. And I think the idea of doing it for money, based on the hype in the magazines and, you know, Fast Company, Inc., all that kind of stuff, I really challenge people how well that's going to hold up when you have no money. And when you're not taking a paycheck, when you're going to your significant other and saying, guess what? We just lost the house because I made this bet and it didn't pan out. You know, so I think you better really think carefully. If you're going to make the bet and you really want to go there, why you're doing it. There's some people who are wonderful technicians. They just love what they do. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to build a good business. And they may get caught in a grind where they love what they're doing, but they're basically making 50 cents an hour doing it and then trying to run a business that they really don't want to run. So if that's who you are, go find a partner who likes to run the business and let you be the technician and build your own world that way. You may be the person who's not the technician, but you love running the business. Well, then go find some really good technicians to partner with. But that's where you got to know your strengths, because otherwise I think very few people are going to make it on their own.
You mentioned that the business was to get you to where you wanted to be after the business. So where's that?
So I got bit by the agricultural bug when I was 7 years old. And I've designed and built farm machinery. I've worked farms. And my goal has always been to get back and go in circles in the field. And I was in 3 different businesses as ways of building enough equity to actually get to go circles in the field. And we got started in Envisage, and we originally formed it in 1990. And we were basically doing work in any field you could think of. We did healthcare, we did manufacturing, we did TV stations, you name it, we were in it. And the goal was that within 10 years to have gotten that to a stable point, no more than 10 to 20 employees, where it would pay the bills and pay me a reasonable salary, and then I could go in circles in the field. Wasn't very successful. I did not meet my goals. And we finally got to the point now where we actually can spend a little time every year going in circles in the fields. But that's what kept me going, is really how do I get enough of an asset base or an income base where I can have a family and go in circles in the field. So
That's really interesting. You've been very clear that it takes a good co-founder to keep a business going. And you haven't written your own story and you haven't done this alone, and you've been very clear on that. Is there anybody else that you wanted to mention or think?
Yeah, Rob Jetty was the co-creator of Envisage and set a lot of the, I'm going to say, the practices that allowed us to survive. And in some of our darkest times, he and I had to separate, and he had to go get a real job, and I had to finish some of the IOUs we had. And then later he came back and rejoined Envisage and then helped us bring it to another level. So I would want to definitely acknowledge him. And the other really is the oddity of staying married as an entrepreneur. So the fact that my wife has survived this and stuck with me, I think is pretty amazing. One of the challenges, again, as an entrepreneur is you got to decide where your family fits in that whole thing, because you're always going to make a choice. Are you going to go to the kids' soccer game, or are you going to go make that other sales call? You're going to go to the kids' soccer game, or you're going to finish this other IOU? Or you're going to stay up all night so you can do the IOU and the soccer game. And it's really tough making those choices in the thick of it. But I will tell you, looking back, I'm very, very happy that I was forced, and that was because of my wife, to make the choices, to do the soccer games and do the other stuff, even if it did require an all-nighter to meet the deliveries. because I'd say I'm one of the few entrepreneurs I know that's still married and actually has relationships with their kids. So to me, when you come out the other side of it, that's what matters. It's back to the people.
Well, you definitely made it on the other side. It sounds like it was successful.
We got lucky. We really
that's
did.
good.
We got very blessed and very lucky. But you know, there's an we did a stat the other day of how many businesses make it to 5 years, how many make it to 10 years, and it's like infinitesimally small, the number that actually make it to 25 years. So, you know, there's a lot of blessings and luck in that.